Hey folks, it's Josh here with Milestone Systems again. I wanted to share with you a commandlet in MilestonePSTools, Milestone PowerShell tools that you might not have used yet. It's a bit of a specialist tool. It's called Trace Events. That lets you sort of look behind the curtain in Milestone software and see what kind of MIP messages are flying around in the background. Uh, the MIP messaging system is how a lot of the events and messages are sent between components of the software. So between the event server and the management server, and between smart client users and the event server. So you can subscribe to listen to particular event IDs. Um, so it's quite useful. So let's dive in. So the first thing I'm going to do is just resize this window so it looks nice on your mobile display that you're probably using. So let's get 80 columns. So there we go. That looks all right. And now we're going to connect to the management server. So connect management server. And we have a public demo server, but I have don't know what the IP address is, so I just made a host file entry called public demo. And then I have a credential already saved for me to use here. I'm going to log in as a basic user. And I'm connected. Let's do a get management server. Yep, we got a management server. We can see the version. We got 2020 R2. We can see that it's running as the Americas demo / administrator account. So perfect, we are connected. So trace events is what we're talking about today. And you typically want to name a commandlet using singular nouns. In this case, it's named trace events because I didn't know that back when I wrote it. Um, but let's look at it. So these are the properties available when you use trace events. You don't need all of them. You probably won't use most of them in most cases. But let's take a look at what we have. Now, the first thing, actually, if you notice, those just kind of all popped up there. So in most PowerShell terminals, you can just hit Control space after that dash, and it'll show you all the available options. So that's definitely helpful. Um, so let's just step through these properties. So the message property you probably won't use unless you are writing a custom integration and you want to listen for your integration's specific message ID for debugging purposes or something. But you can supply one or more strings here to represent the message IDs you want to create communication ID filters for. And then we have this event header type. So what this is that the new event indication is the message ID that we subscribe to by default when we use trace events. And that will produce a lot of messages, everything from motion detected to recording started to um, database available or LPR events. They're all going to show up under that new event indication message. So if you want to get specific about the events that you want to listen for, say, for example, you are only interested in access control events or LPR events, then you can put that value in there, and then your output will be a little bit less noisy. And again, after the property name, you can hit Control space, and it'll give you the available options. So in this case, there's a hard-coded parameter set that says these are the valid parameters for this, or the valid values for this parameter. So you can just hit Control space, and it'll give you all the options there. Let's go back to our list. So we have event header message. So if you are not using event header type, you can use event header message and put in a string that also can include a wildcard star character. And that way you can capture a specific message or new event indications with a specific message, or with a maybe there's a multiple messages that both they all start with the same first word or something. So you can use wildcards that way. Then we have include configuration changed. So this is just a switch, and a switch is just a parameter that doesn't have a value. It's just you either supply it just like that or you don't. And what that does is by default, the configuration change events they're not new event indication events. They are specifically configuration changed events. So this allows you to subscribe to that specific event. Same with the include failover switch. So if there's a recording server failover event and you want to listen for those, you can do that. And say if you are interested in these failover events, but you don't want to get all the other new event indication messages, you can exclude new events indication, and then you won't get those. So that'll clean up your output quite a bit. Next, we have trace all sites. So this is if you have a Milestone federated architecture, if you have multiple management servers that are all connected together in a happy family, you can trace all sites. And then what happens in the background is that whatever messages you're subscribing to, you're going to do that subscription to each of the event servers that you're connected to. So if you connect to a parent site and there's 2 child sites below it, if you do trace all sites, it's going to subscribe to events on 3 different management servers. All right, and then we have this raw switch, and what that does is by default, if you don't supply the raw switch, then trace events is going to output. It's going to kind of massage these events and the properties so that what you get in PowerShell is something a little bit easier to digest, but it might not have all the useful information you're looking for. So by supplying -raw, you can get all of the detail that's included in these events. So for example, if you're looking at LPR events, which we'll do in the following example, you can look at the value of the license plate and the confidence level. So that might be useful. You could do the same thing with access control events. You could look at the properties of those access control events. So you can get pretty verbose if you need to. And then the next 3 here, max events, timeout, and inter-event delay, these are stop conditions. So if you don't supply a stop condition, then trace events is going to run forever or until you hit Control C or close the PowerShell terminal. So if you want it to eventually stop on its own, then you should supply, max events. And if you put in 100, then after 100 events are received, it should quit. Timeout is just an overall timeout value. So if you supply a time span of 60 seconds or 90 seconds, then after that amount of time, it's just going to abort. And then this is another timeout option, but so this is a timeout between events. So if you want this commandlet to quit after it's been more than a minute between events, then you can supply a time span here. All right, so without further ado, let's look at what trace events actually gives us. So I'll just look at 10 events real quick, and we're not going to use the raw parameter. We'll just see what it gives us here. Okay, so we have this timestamp, the message ID. It's a mix of different events. So we have a license plate event, we have a motion event, we should probably have a recording started event in here somewhere. We have some AI analytic events. Okay, but you'll notice, say this license plate event, nowhere in here is the actual license plate value, because this is just a generic new events indication, and the properties that we're interested in an LPR event are kind of buried in the properties of this. So let's look at a little bit of these LPR events and look a little deeper. So let's do trace events. And I'm going to specify just the LPR event header type. And I'll do raw, and we'll do max events 5. We'll just look at what these look like. So a raw event, we have at the original message from the event server that's wrapped into this object that just has a message and then a time received. So this time received is the time that this PowerShell session received the event from the event server. So this is here because if you're testing some sort of performance, you're trying to get some performance metrics on how quickly events are showing up on the client side when you're debugging your plugin or something. You want to know when the event server delivered it to this computer. And so behind the scenes, this trace events commandlet has a queue, and as soon as the event is received, a timestamp is generated, and then this gets dropped into a queue to be sent into the pipeline to you, the user, or the next command in the pipeline. So that way, there's no artificial delays as a result of your post-processing of these events. All right, so with all that said, let's look at the actual content of a message. So here's the last command, and let me just clear the window here. There we go. So there's our last command. I'm going to add a filter here. I'm going to select object and, oops. Just kind of running off the side of the screen here. What I will do instead is select object. There, I can go to the next line for you. So select object, and I'm going to expand that message property, and we'll just see what those look like. So these are the messages we get from the event server. So there's not a whole lot of useful information there. We have a message ID, which we already knew what that was going to be because that's what we subscribed to. But then we have this data object that looks like an analytics event. So let's expand the the data property to look at that event. So we'll do select object, expand. We'll expand data. There we go. So that's looking a little more interesting. So it looks like this object list has the license plate value in it. And then this rule list looks like probably the plate lists that that this match was matched on. So let's look into this object list and see what it has. So I'll do select object, expand property again, object list. All right, so that's interesting. We can see the confidence level and the value. And then if we were interested in seeing the box that the smart client's going to draw around the plate on the image, then we could look into that polygon object. But I am interested in, for this example, I just want to look at the confidence and the value. So say you just wanted to see a running list of detections and their values, or their confidence values. We could select from that object list the value and the confidence. And now we get some more some output that's a little easier on the eyes. So we see our confidence levels, and these are just on a range from 0 to 1, a percentage value. So if we wanted to filter specifically for LPR events of confidence greater than 85, we could do where object confidence is greater than 0.85. Now they're all going to be the higher confidence values. And you'll notice it only gave me 2 values. That's because I was listening for a maximum of 5 events, and then I filtered the output. So that's why it looks like it filtered out 3 of them that were less than 0.85 confidence. So if I wanted to just let this run indefinitely, I could take away the stop condition and then just leave this running. And when I want to quit, I can hit Control C, and the communication session with that event server should just be closed gracefully for us. I hope I hope you find this useful and interesting. If you do something fun with this commandlet, I'd love to hear about it, and maybe we can share that in a later video. Thank you.